Hello, everyone. Welcome to my live streamed recital for Cook Memorial Public Library. We'll be starting in a couple minutes, but I wanted to get the stream started a little bit early. So if you could do us a favor and just type in how many people are watching on your screen, that would be very helpful. So yeah, well, welcome. I'm so glad to see you here. So today's recital is going to be a little bit different than the recital in June. Thank you all for coming in today and for coming if you were here in June. I'm going to do a little bit more talking just because I have been thinking a lot about music in the context of everything that's happened over the summer and that is continuing to happen. And I was thinking that I would talk a bit about, oh, the sound is off. Oh, no. No one can hear me. Oh, no. Let's see about that. 1 second. All right. Hopefully that can be helpful. Can anyone else hear me? Okay. Okay, wonderful. Well, then hopefully everyone can hear me all right. All right. Wonderful. So yes, so I was thinking about that, and I was starting to think about what music's role in the world is, and I started to, as I was thinking about that, I realized that that was maybe too broad a topic for a recital, and so what I wanted to talk about instead was how composers adjust to their piano and their instrument, because there are a lot of wonderful keyboard players and composers for piano who have written for different types of the piano over the centuries. And it's interesting to see how their instrument comes across in their compositions. So before we dive into that topic and hear some music, I wanted to thank a couple of people. You'll see that I do have some notes here, so if I'm looking over, it's because of that. I want to thank Valentina Cotini again for inviting me back. I'm really excited to be here and to be playing a new program. It's going to be really a lot of fun for me. Hopefully for all of you at home too. I also wanted to thank the Friends of the Cook Memorial Public Library for sponsoring this event. So with that, the program today is going to be three composers. The first will be Frédéric Chopin's first, second, and fourth impromptus. The second will be some pieces by Lili Boulanger, Trois Morceaux. And the last will be Haydn's last E-flat major sonata, Hoboken 52. So Chopin's a very interesting composer because, of course, he's the most marvelous pianist you could think of, really. I mean, most people who have even glanced at a piano once know the name Chopin. And he writes really brilliantly for the modern instrument because he was one of the first composers to really have access to this sort of instrument within action and system of producing sound that's similar to the modern instrument that we play today. So these impromptus are in A-flat major for number 1, which is Opus 29. You have F-sharp major for number 2, and you have C-sharp minor. And some of you who might know a little bit about theory might recognize that these are keys with a lot of flats and sharps in them. This was done purposefully. Chopin thought that having pieces in keys with more sharps and flats were easier for the hand because the black keys, which are mainly the sharp and flat keys, not exclusively, made it easier to play the piano when you use them. His first exercise for beginning pianists, for any of my students watching, they might recognize this, is he would have his students put their 3 middle fingers on the group of 3 black keys and the 1st and 5th finger on the white keys. So he wrote purposefully in these keys with a lot of accidentals because he felt that it made it easier to play the piano and to navigate the keyboard. These pieces are in an ABA form. They move, the first and the fourth one move from a very figurative music without a clear melody to a very lyrical one. And the second one moves from a very lyrical melody to more of a march-like character, ending in rather virtuosic runs. So with that, I think I've spoken enough on the Chopin for now, and I'll dive right on in. So this is Impromptu number 1 in A-flat major. It will be followed by Impromptu number 2 in F-sharp major. And then finally, the fourth Impromptu, also commonly known as the Fantasy Impromptu, in C-sharp minor. Oh, and I will move the music off the stand. Thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed that. So a couple of last things about the Fantasy Impromptu. That was published after Chopin had died by his friend Julian Fontana. And it's interesting that he didn't publish it, since some consider it one of the stronger of his group of his three other impromptus that were published during his life. It's certainly an interesting piece. That middle section is a very famous melody. It's been popularized and used in a number of different settings. And it comes back at the end rather beautifully, which in a nice synthesis. The opening is in C sharp minor, which sounds like this. And the middle section is in D flat major, which C sharp and D flat are the same key on the keyboard. And so it's a parallel major and minor. And so to combine it at the end rather beautifully spelled as C sharp major instead of D flat major is a rather special moment. I hope you enjoyed that performance. I had a lot of fun. I'm sure you're applauding rapturously at home as per usual. I want to take this moment to again thank Valentina Cotini and the Friends of the Cook Memorial Public Library for having me this evening come back. It's really a delight to be here. So the next piece is by a French composer named Lili Boulanger. Her sister is probably more famous than she is currently. Her sister is the famous pedagogue Nadia Boulanger, who taught people like Piazzolla and Elliott Carter and Aaron Copland. And it was, she really taught basically every major musical mind in the 20th century. Her sister Lily Boulanger was the first woman to win the Prix de Rome, a prestigious prize offered by the Paris Conservatoire, which a prize that Debussy won, for instance, 20 years before she did. She won this prize in 1913 when she was 19 years old with the oratorio Faust et Hélène. And as a result, she went to the Villa de' Medici in Rome and composed the next three pieces on the program, which are collected as under the title Trois Morceaux, or three pieces. The first is called D'un vieux jardin, or of an old garden. The second, D'un jardin clair, or of a light garden, a clear garden, or a light-filled garden. And the third is called cortège, or procession. The first two, both dealing with garden themes, have a lot of light in them. And their names also suggest kind of, or at least to my mind, in the first one, of an old garden, winding paths and overgrown paths and dark areas of a garden that are hard to see through. The harmonies are not like what we heard in the Chopin or what we will hear in the Haydn. They're a lot more what we associate with Debussy, Ravel, and impressionistic composers. Lily Boulanger uses these expertly, still using traditional harmonies, but bringing in also set theory and more of a linear approach than we might find in piano works of Debussy. Of D'un jardin clair, the second work, I always think of as being in a garden enclosed in glass, like the Jewel Box in St. Louis, and watching the sunset. This piece is not just about being able to see all the plant life, but it's about how light changes through the day. And Lily Boulanger brings in a certain French element by using open fourths and fifths. And finally, Cortège is a transcription, actually, of an earlier work of hers for violin and piano, which with the same title. And it is so infectious and marvelous that hopefully I don't just get up and start marching along with it while I'm playing. Lily Boulanger, the last thing, lived a very sad life. She died at 25. She was born in 1893 and died in 1918, towards the end of World War I. She lived a very short life and a very sick life, but her music is a testament to her genius and her creativity. She really is just one of the best composers of the 20th century and of all time. And I want to read, just before I play these pieces, I want to read a quote of hers about her by the composer Henry Barraud. The oeuvre of Lily Boulanger is a monument realized. It is not simply the promise of great work to come, but the achievement of an exquisite body of work by a composer of accomplished style, firmly rooted in a classicism which owes nothing to a school, but solely to the natural perception which stems from a penetrating intelligence and talent. So without further ado, Lily Boulanger Trois Morceaux. The first, D'un vieux jardin. Second, D'un jardin clair. And third, Cortège. Thank you all very, very much. So the last piece on the program is the Haydn E flat major sonata. And this one I happened on an article on JSTOR a couple of days ago about kind of what I wanted to talk about more broadly tonight, which is the difference between English forte pianos of the late 18th century and Viennese forte pianos of the late 18th century. I know it sounds as exciting as it actually is for most people. It is actually really, really interesting. I promise not to go on too much about it today, but during the 18th century and the 19th century, pianos built in different places were drastically different, both in their action, in their sound, in just every manner of their construction. And so in England, you had a totally different instrument than you had in Vienna. Why is this important for Franz Joseph Haydn? Haydn was born in Hungary and lived most of his life there as a servant. He worked primarily in Austria and in Germany, but in 1791 and in 1794, he made trips to London. And in London, in his second trip, between 1794 and 1795, he composed the last three piano sonatas. These are the piano sonatas that are most famous, especially the C major, and the one you're going to hear tonight, the E flat major. Both of these sonatas are very different from sonatas that he had written elsewhere in Europe. The differences in the English forte piano at that time was that it was a louder, more resonant instrument. It would sound to our ears today like someone was over-pedaling, even if the pianists weren't pedaling at all. That's because the dampers, the pieces of wood and felt that fall on the string to stop the vibrations and the sound, didn't quite work terribly well, and there would be an after resonance that would linger. So composers working in London would take advantage of this, composers like Dussek and Clementi, and they would create really long cantabile lines for the right hand, which was much more resonant and much more able to achieve a sense of lyricism and legato than the Viennese counterparts, and very much chordal sounds for the left hand, because the left hand was especially resonant and would linger after the player had stopped depressing the keys. There are a number of other, in this Haydn sonata, elements from English pianistic compositional techniques that Haydn uses. And I just want to point out a couple of them. First of all, the resonance will come across right away in the first movement. It's unlike anything that came before. In fact, just a little while earlier, this was the start of an earlier E flat major sonata. In fact, the one he composed before this one. It's like a different world. So when Haydn went to London and composed these sonatas, he composed them for the instrument he had in mind. He was trying something new in order to take advantage of all of the elements that the British forte piano afforded him. A couple of other things. In the third movement, you'll hear this in the left hand. This was considered the English drum sort of style. It was a depressed note and the same note being played short an octave higher. You'll also hear virtuosic scales going through 3 or 4 octaves right away, as well as an alternating accompaniment with the melody below it, like this. All techniques that Haydn used to exploit this new instrument. These last 3 sonatas were written for the virtuoso pianist Therese Janssen, who was born in Germany but lived and concertized in London. She was extraordinarily important to Haydn during this time and was a significant source of inspiration for these sonatas. In fact, even though he composed them in 1794, they weren't published until 1799. I think because he wanted to help Therese Janssen maintain exclusive performing rights, essentially. By limiting distribution, it was harder for other people to play it. And so this was really her piece of music, and it is in fact dedicated to her. So with that, I will get started and play Haydn's E flat major sonata. Actually, before I do, there's one other important thing, which is that I will also be performing a live stream performance on December 13th, not in my living room, with much better, so we'll have a venue with much better internet access and better audio too, but at Pianoforte. I will be, I'm sure, sending out a lot of information through my website, Daniel Baer Piano, through my Twitter account, Daniel Baer Piano, and through my Instagram account as well, Daniel Baer Piano. So if you're not already, you can follow me there. I'm going to offer now the Haydn E flat major sonata, and yes, I'll take any questions after that. thank you all very, very much for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. One last time, I want to thank Valentina Cotini and the Friends of the Cook Memorial Public Library for putting on tonight's program. I hope you'll join me December 13th. I'll be playing the 10 Preludes by Carlos Chavez, a Mexican composer, writing around the time of the American composer Aaron Copland. It's going to be a great program, and more information will follow. So thank you all for coming out, and I'll take any questions I can stay for a little bit before I start teaching again. So any questions about today's program? All right. Well, I should probably wait a little bit longer. Sorry, it's very strange to just talk to a computer, which it has just an image of me on it. It's a bit disconcerting. I'm a big fan of that last Haydn sonata. It really has all of Haydn's warmth in it, and Haydn's personality and goodness. I think he was. There's this joke in the music community that if you went to a diner with Beethoven, he would just yell at you the entire time, and if you went with Mozart, he would tell you how you're an idiot in 14 different languages, and if you went with Haydn, you'd have a great time. So in that case, I am once again, you can follow me at Daniel Baer Piano on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can also follow what's happening with my concerts, live stream, and my teaching through my website, danielbaerpiano.com. So thank you all for coming out tonight. I hope you all stay safe. For those of you observing, have a meaningful Yom Kippur. And I will see you at the next recital on December 13th at 4 p.m. Central Time. Thank you very much. Oh, what piece I liked? Sorry, I just saw that question from Laura Blanchard. My favorite piece to practice. I like them all. They're all very difficult, and they all require different things. So it keeps me on my toes. So it's a bit of a cop-out of an answer, but there you are. All right, with that, thank you all very much, and I will see you next time, December 13th at 4 p.m.